Today we begin to look at the book of John in chapter 4, and I believe that there are things there that we probably need to carefully look at and see how those things apply to our lives and how they can help us to build a more cohesive society. We told the story in John chapter 4 about how Jesus went to a city in Samaria and he met with a woman. Now, we've got to understand a little bit of the background story here, that there was a heavy disparity between the Jews and the Samaritans. Even though Israel used to be one kingdom, at a point in time, it was divided into two, the north and the south. And the capital city of the north was Samaria. And after a period of time, the Assyrians came and besieged the north, and what they did was that they expelled the Jews who were living in the north and brought in foreigners to try and mix the society. The whole community became like a mixed society. And the Jews who were taken into exile and the ones who stayed in the south kind of felt that it was no longer a pure Jewish community. So it created disparity, and the people in Samaria felt that Mount Perazim was the place of worship that they should go to, whereas the people in the south had the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And most Jews would have made a conscious decision not to go through Samaria, so they would rather go a long way out to get to a destination. But Jesus kind of broke that down and broke the barrier by going into Samaria. And it was at a time also that the kind of conversation between a man and a woman was more private, and it wasn't quite a public thing. So just understanding the context of that story. Um, so Jesus comes to the woman. He said in verse 7, a woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, give me a drink, for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. So Jesus was by himself, and this lady came to fetch water, and Jesus asked for a drink of water. And then the woman of Samaria said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, can ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. And I think that what that points out immediately to us is the whole tension that comes up when we take the issue of race, the issue of ethnicity, and over the summer and during this pandemic period, we have seen some disparities in the way that black people have suffered from the whole pandemic. More ethnic minorities have suffered from it more than anyone else. We have seen how that the killings in America of black people have created racial tension, and politicians have not always helped in trying to bring communities together. Now, it's an age-old problem that has existed, and in some countries there are racial tensions that exist, there are religious bigotries that exist, and all kinds of problems that exist. But Jesus did something amazing here. He did not remove himself from the midst of the tension. He actually threw himself into the situation to address it. He's the great reconciler. And he engages this woman whose mindsets had obviously been programmed by years of adulteration and years of indoctrination, where generations have said, remember who you are, you're a Samaritan, don't have anything to do with a Jew. Just as sometimes also, sadly, in our society, you are friends with people at work, but wait until somebody in your family decides to marry outside of that community, then all kinds of problems flare up. There are communities that perhaps as a black Nigerian who feel my child should never marry a white or somebody from outside of the culture. And sadly, in Christianity, we do put up some of these barriers sometimes, and it is time for us to look at those barriers that we put in and deal with those issues. As Christians, Christ has brought us into one family. We're members of one family. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, male nor female. We have been reconciled one to another. And this was the message of Jesus. It's interesting that when you look at this scripture, you see in verse 23 um, and verse 24, Jesus is trying to draw the woman's attention to the fact that God is seeking for people who will worship him in spirit and in truth. And his ultimate goal is that we break down these walls that inhibit our worship, that stop us from flowing, and that we come to God. And at a time in our society when there are racial tensions, we in the church ought to begin to address those issues and encourage our people to extend their right hand of fellowship to people who may not look like them, act like them. Um, this woman said, you're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan woman. We have got nothing in common. In verse 10, Jesus answered and said to her, if only you knew the gift of God, if only you understood the person standing here that I'm the gift of God, I'm the gift of reconciliation. If only you understood who it was that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. You would have asked him. Jesus is trying to prompt the lady to think and to ask the right question. He's actually leading her on to ask for living water. Maybe at this point, the lady should have said, "Okay, give me the living water." Um, After all, at this time, the fame of Jesus had gone all over the place, and I'm sure the lady would have heard about Jesus. However, she may not have recognized that it was Jesus who was standing there. And so she displayed a level of ignorance that some of us do. There are so many ignorant people in our communities, so many ignorant people who carry on with this legacy of ignorance. What the Bible says, handing down an empty way of life to generations to come. You know, there's so much ignorance. In verse 11, she says, the woman said to him, Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Ignorance. If Jesus wanted water, he could have done something different. He could have asked his disciples. It wasn't just about water here. Understand me. When Jesus refers to her, he says living water. It wasn't just about a drink of cold water. Of course, with a desert situation, everybody would have been parched. But Jesus was actually drawing her attention to something. But when she overcame the first thing about discrimination, racial divide, the next thing she displayed was ignorance. And ignorance can destroy a generation. It can destroy a people when we're ignorant um, of other people, when we do not take time to find out about other people, other people who are not like us, when we don't ask questions, the right questions, we can walk about ignorantly. Everybody might think that we all like the same things because we all are of the same persuasion or the same cultural background. But no, we are all different, and even in a home situation, every parent will tell you that you take time to understand every one of your children because each person is different, and what we bring to the table is different. Each church is different. How we minister, how we in Praise House, we love our music. We've got the greatest musicians in Croydon, and we but then I have to constantly tell my musicians, okay, don't overdo it, kind of stay within the boundaries, because if you leave my musicians, they'll play for Croydon on a Sunday morning. They'll play so loud that the whole Croydon will come out dancing. But we've got to understand we have neighbors, we're not unmindful of the fact that no a sound travels. So this lady displayed a level of ignorance. Listen to this next thing she says in verse 12. Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? Are you greater than our fathers? He speaks to me of habits and cultures and traditions that we have built over the years, and we're so deep in them. We think that there is only one way of doing things, and but things change. Even those of us who are parents, and I look at myself as a diaspora African here in the UK. I kind of feel that my children's generation, they're different. They kind of have their own different ways and ways of looking at things. Their outlook to life, their understanding and interpretation of life is different. And if we're going to make any meaningful change in our community, we have got to take time, understand other people, but also that some of the culture, embedded culture, and lived experiences, that we will need to shape them in such a way that other people can understand where we're coming from. We cannot dig in our heels and say it has to be done just this way. If it's my way or no other way. It's only the way that I have done it. That's the only acceptable way. Hey, listen, people have come from, one thing I love about South Croydon, which is the area that I live in, is that if it wasn't for the pandemic, we have a variety of eating places that you could go to. And you could go in today and have an Asian meal, and tomorrow you could have Italian, and the other day you could have an African dinner or an English roast on a Sunday. The variety is the spice of life, and we need to embrace other cultures and other traditions that are different to us. And this lady was so bent on just her own way of doing things. And in verse 15 it says, the woman said to him, Sir, give me the water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw. Just give me, not give us. There is this whole selfishness around this request. Give me, just give me. It's I, me, and myself. And whatever good we have, whatever blessings we have, are not just for us to keep, it's for us to share with others. One of the things that came out of this whole lockdown experience, it's how generous people are, how kind-hearted people are. The food banks, the number of food banks in my city, the number of people who rose up, volunteered to serve. Walls of walls have been broken down, and people came out to serve, to help others, to inquire about their neighbors. We saw the best of Great Britain during this lockdown experience, when neighbors could look out for each other and ask questions. If you hadn't seen somebody for a while, you just make sure they're okay, make sure your neighbor has supply of medicines and all that. Selfishness needs to be taken away from us. It's not just give me that water to drink for me alone. It's how we can use the resources that God gives to us to be a blessing to everybody. And so I just want to conclude this message by saying that, you know, um, John chapter 4 is a lesson that we need to continue to observe and live out, and not allow racial tension to divide us, not allow bigotry to come in between us and other people, just to make sure that we understand other people, other cultures, walk away from the ignorance that we have held on to, and be selfless in our service to others and to humanity, and to our great city, which I love, Croydon. God bless you. We'll do a second part of this next time.